between legs, and then they go home. And what we do, if I got called to take a trip today, they call me and say, Susan, are you available to fly Sunday? I say yes. And then the first thing I say is, how many passengers do I have? Do any of them have any food allergies, or any of them have any religious cautionary precautions for food, like kosher or Indian with no beef, or vegan or vegetarian or gluten-free, and then they'll say, you have 6 people. They want a 6-course hot meal. You're leaving at 1800, which is 6 p.m. You're going to Madrid. And then they want a tapas breakfast before landing. Well, I have to put that entire catering order together.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Hangar, where we have exclusive conversations with leaders in private aviation. I'm your host, Dagan Davis, and our guest today is Susan C. Friedenberg, and she is the president and CEO of Corporate Flight Attendant Training and Consulting. Susan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very honored.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on. There's people like you are the reason why we're able to keep this show going, and I really appreciate that. So what we'll do is we'll get right into adding some context to all of this starting out. So what we really want to know, and the audience really wants to know, is who are you and what do you do?
Okay, so I'm Susan Friedenberg, and I've been in aviation my whole life. When I was 5 years old, my dad took me to the Philadelphia airport. My grandparents would go to Havana, Cuba every winter, and I was 5, and I saw all the stewardesses in the airport and the pilots and all the activity and the emotion and commotion and people coming and going for different reasons. And I said, Daddy, I want to be like them. What are they? And he said, they're stewardesses. I said, I want to do that. And he said, you can do anything you want, honey. I support you. And my whole life I would lay on the grass and look at airplanes overhead. And I had to be in aviation. So as soon as I was old enough to apply to the airlines, I started out commercial. I flew for American Airlines for 7 years, and they were not going globally at the time. And I really wanted to travel. And so I used to have these crews from Capital Air and World Airways that were international charters with stickers all over their suitcases from all over the world. So I quit American and got hired by Capital Air. And I loved flying for them. It was like a fractured fairy tale airline. It was so crazy. It was so much fun. And they went bankrupt. And I would see these really cool jets on the tarmacs and the runways, and they were private jets. And I thought, I have to figure out what that is, because that's where I need to be.
Okay, great. So then what ultimately got you into the private aviation then?
Well, I started researching the National Business Aviation Association. There was no online at that point. They had a huge book with every single flight department all over the country and the world that were members. And so I had the book, and I was living in San Diego at the time. And I just started looking at the states I would be willing to move to, and started calling all these people. And then I met this wonderful woman named Joy Watkins, who was the chief flight attendant for a corporation in San Diego. And she coached me and groomed me and got me my very first flight on a Hawker, which is a small mid-range plane, a Hawker. And I had 8 passengers that wanted a 4-course hot dinner. The oven was like this big, and I pulled it off.
That's probably a full Hawker at that point, right?
Yep.
8 or 9.
Yep. It was amazing. And I had 2 famous people on, which made me a little nervous, but not too nervous. And I pulled it off. I did an amazing job. And I feel like in life, there's things that you're good at and things that you're not good at. I was great at this from the first flight, which blew my mind, actually, because I was traumatized.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. And it's funny you mentioned Hawker. I've been on a Hawker 750 before. Just a very, very short flight, but I at least got to experience, what it's like. So I'm very familiar with that type of plane. And so you did mention, this was my next question, but you did mention that you were flying some famous people. You don't have to drop any names or say any names or anything, but was it pretty often that you were flying famous people or people that you recognized?
Oh
That
yes. Oh
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I started flying contract, and then Coca-Cola hired me, and they moved me to Atlanta, and I flew for them for a year, and then I wound up leaving aviation for about 4 years. My ex-husband was in the eyewear industry, and I was very familiar with high fashion eyewear. And so I was repping eyewear in Georgia and Klein Eyewear for 4 years. And then it was like I'd go past an airport and go crazy. I would just go nuts. Like, I've got to be back in the air. So DuPont hired me. I started applying to corporations again, and DuPont hired me and moved me from Atlanta to Philadelphia. Well, Wilmington is where they're based, but moved to Philly. It's a 30 miles away. And I flew for DuPont for 4 years, and then they sold two Gulfstreams. So I was the junior flight attendant. So I got cut, and then I
Okay.
started flying contract. I've had a very interesting career.
Yeah. Yeah.
I flew for them for 4 years, and then I started flying contract, and I had the marketing skills from selling eyewear. I'm really good at marketing. So I was marketing myself and flying contract again, all over again. And I just was part of the National Business Aviation Association, and I was the vice chair for 2 years of the flight attendant committee, and I was the chair of the contract flight attendant committee. And I would be at our conferences, and I would be teaching how to market yourself and how to, get into this industry. And I'm really good I have no fear of being in front of a room with people. And excuse me. And so I would just be teaching. And my mentor, Bo Altman, who created FACS training, which is the first evacuation training for flight crew for business jets, he said, "Susan, you command an audience." I'm very funny too. I was doing stand-up comedy before COVID in Atlantic City and in Philadelphia.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, I love stand-up. I love to make people laugh. I just loved it. And he said, "You need to create a training." He said, "You absolutely have to do a training. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?" I said, "Flying." He goes, "That's ridiculous." He said, people come through evacuation training, but they have no idea really how to market themselves, how to work a trip. They're clueless about catering. They have no idea how to work a major international trip to like Africa or India, where they have to get all the catering in advance, have it packed on dry ice in the baggage compartment. They don't know. You don't know what you don't know. You can teach them everything. So I thought about it, and I thought, why not? So I went to Big Sur, my favorite place on earth, and I shipped 2 boxes of things, and I sat in a cabin for a week and created my first manual. And it was a 2-day training, and I was doing it here in Philadelphia in the community room of the building I lived in. And my manual was 47 pages. And may I show you something?
Sure.
I can't believe it's been 27 years I've been teaching. This is my manual today.
Wow.
It's 480 pages. Okay. It's 8 pounds. You can press it.
And that's everything you would need to know for your training.
Yep. It's
Okay.
it's everything, how to do the job. It's just everything. I have a list here of what I
That's
teach.
amazing.
But when we get to that, I'll tell. And I just want to say, this is Greta. She's a flight attendant kitty, and the minute I get on the computer, she has to get on the chair. So I hope all of you don't mind.
Greta needs the spotlight, huh?
She does. She does. She's so sweet.
Awesome. Well, nice to meet you, Greta. And so, Susan, I know you have a lot of experience, flying as you just explained, and now you're explaining your training. When was that when you started that? What? How long ago was that when you started again?
My my first excuse me. My first training was December of 1999. I can't believe
Okay.
it. My first training.
So so how has that changed? How has your training adapted with the times coming from uh, let's say early 2000s, late 1990s to now into 2026?
Well, I have so much experience and I would just keep adding things. I would see things on the internet and I have a million videos that I showed them in the training and when people sign up for the training, before they sign up for the training, I interview them. I'm very careful about who I train, Dagan. I do not want to take somebody's money if they don't have the skill set for this. My father raised me with a lot of integrity around business. And so I interview people. Like if you're 17 or 18, the other day I told this girl, you really need to apply to the airlines. And I gave her a really good website for that. But I want to make sure that people have the skill set for this because it's a very intense job, what we do. And you, can I give you a little list of some of the things that I'm teaching, or should I wait?
Well, one quick question:
Sure.
what's a red flag when you're actually interviewing these people and you're just thinking they're not cut out for this, or this
Well,
just
well,
isn't
if
going to
they're
work?
too young, if their work history isn't anything that would um, merge or be appropriate for this industry,
Okay.
if they're too old, the average age of a corporate flight attendant is probably 40, and you know they have to be a foodie. They have to be a foodie. And I just talk to them and then I'll say to them, I really think you should apply to the airlines. And I'm just very careful because I don't want my name on a resume floating around my industry where I'm well known with somebody that's not going to, make it in the industry.
Yeah. So is that a good segue to go into the airlines first and then
No,
move over to corporate?
no. I train many people that have no airline experience, and actually, those people are, you know, that here's the deal, okay? Because I flew commercially for 15 years, and it's a hard job, and it's even harder now because of all the insanity going on airplanes. But my sisters and brothers show up. My commercial sisters and brothers show up. They sign in. They check their emergency equipment, and then they check their carts to make sure that they have all their food and alcohol, whatever. And they go up and down the aisles. The passengers disembark, and then they have to clean the plane, possibly between legs, and then they go home. And what we do, if I got called to take a trip today, they call me and say, Susan, are you available to fly Sunday? I say yes. And then the first thing I say is, how many passengers do I have? Um, do any of them have any food allergies, or any of them have any religious cautionary precautions for food, like kosher or Indian with no beef, or vegan or vegetarian or gluten free, And then they'll say, you have six people. They want a six-course hot meal. You're leaving at 1800, which is 6 p.m. You're going to Madrid. And then they want a tapas breakfast before landing. Well, I have to put that entire catering order together.
Yeah.
We have aviation caterers, but you have to learn how to put an order together. How you need to find out what equipment is in the galley. How large is the oven? How large is the microwave? Will it take pints? Will it take quarts? Is the oven? How many racks does it have? Every airplane is different, so there's so much to what we do. It's amazing what we do.
That is amazing to think about. And, one thing that you pointed out there indirectly is just knowing what questions to ask. And that comes with experience. And that's why you're trying to put that into a training and really get people prepared for that. And
Oh,
that's
right. And I teach them also about cover letters and resumes. Cover letters are really important because cover letter is what sells you to the company. It's like
yep.
whatever their logo is, you can use that logo, like if their logo is "We do the best." I would say in my cover letter, I can assure you I will do the best, from cabin safety to culinary to CRM, that's crew resource management. With the pilots, I'm a team player. I researched that your CEO uh, at a college went to Africa and worked for the Peace Corps for 4 years. I would be honored to fly with somebody like that. You know what I mean? So it shows that I'm really looking, or knowing what their product lines are and mentioning that. Know who the CEO, you got to know the CEO, or, whatever. I mean, it's really intense. So your resume is important and your cover letter is important.
Okay, great. Well, Susan, I hate to cut you off here, but we're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we're going to come back. And I actually do want to talk about the types of programs that you offer in the trainings.
Okay.
And so that way we can dive even deeper into your trainings.
Thank you.
But real quick, we're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we will be right back.
Okay.
Every trip begins with a choice. Spend hours navigating crowded airports, security lines, and delayed flights? Or take control of your schedule. With Triton Air, your aircraft is ready when you are. Arrive, board, and be on your way in minutes, not hours. Whether you're traveling for business or escaping for the weekend, Triton Air delivers a private aviation experience built entirely around you. Personalized service, unmatched convenience, and the freedom to fly where you want, when you want. Triton Air. Private travel without compromise.
All right, and we're back to our episode of Beyond the Hangar. We are here with Susan C. Friedenberg, and she is the president and CEO of Corporate Flight Attendant Training and Consulting. And so that kind of leads me to exactly what I want to talk about is your training, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into, what kind of programs you're offering, and what does it look like when someone starts with your program all the way till they really start flying with someone.
Well, for one thing, I don't take people's money and train them and abandon them. They can call me 24/7. I have trained so many people over the years that I've become good friends with, and they'll call me and they'll say, I have a problem, and then we'll talk about it. I coach them and mentor them. I really care about the people that I train. I want them to have an amazing career like I've had. So, from start to finish, and they also have to go to emergency training. They have to go to flight safety training, in my opinion, or FACS training. Those are the two industry evacuation trainings. If you're coming from commercial, you need to learn how to evacuate a private jet. It's completely different.
And are those required trainings?
Most companies want you to have that, although I will say there's no federal air regulation requiring corporate specific egress training, which makes me crazy. And I've been speaking out for years over this, trying to get the FAA to create, mandate an FAR saying, you have to be trained. The rule is 19 or less people. You don't have, this is from them, 19 people or less, you don't have to have a trained flight attendant. That's ridiculous. Why do you have a defibrillator in the back of the plane with nobody to operate it? If the CEO is by himself and he goes into cardiac arrest, he can't defib himself. If he starts choking, they run in the bathroom. It's just insane. Or if there's an unplanned evacuation, the pilots are trying to land the plane. So I've been on a crusade. Everybody knows this about me. I've been in all these magazines screaming about this, So they, in order to be really taken seriously, and to get a job with a good company, you've got to go to egress training.
Well, and I think that just makes your training and your expertise even better if you're really pushing that with the people that are going through your training programs. And then when they, read a cover letter that is already saying that, or a resume that is already saying, hey, we took these extra steps, these extra trainings, I would imagine that becomes way more attractive to an employer.
Right. Have that on their resume that they went to flight safety and what they're certified for the Gulfstream 550. That's the only plane that you have to have a flight attendant on for 10 or more seats, and that they're CPR, defibrillator, AED trained. But I teach them how to put that on their resume, with all their qualifications, firefighting and everything.
Okay. And then, so how does your program work? What is the timeline for the entire program?
Well, now because of all of the viruses and everything, I'm doing it on Zoom. I'm doing a 5-day Zoom training. It's about 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day, and people love it because they don't have to spend money for an airline ticket, hotel, transportation. I was doing my trainings before in Teterboro. I was actually teaching at Flight Safety in Atlanta. I was doing it in Denver, Long Beach, California, Chicago, Boston. I would travel all around doing my trainings. And then things just started changing. My dad got sick, and I wanted to be back in Philly to be near. And so I brought it back to Philly, and then in person. And then COVID hit, and everything for everybody went downhill. So I decided I'm going to do a Zoom training, and people love it. It's so cozy. I'll train 7 people, and it's so much fun. You get to meet their kids, their pets, their husbands, their boyfriend, whatever. It's just cozy, and they love it. And I like to connect them so that they can support each other. They become friends, and they can be each other's support system.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And so that's a really quick program, but very
Five,
informationally
5 days.
packed. Which, yeah, yeah. So 5 days, and you showed us the folder here on video, and so a
Yeah, my
lot of
manual.
information. So if someone is interested, who's listening to this to this actual episode right now, and they're interested in getting involved with your training, they want to apply. How can they do that?
Well, you can go to my website, which Dig is going to have on the site, www.corporateflighttraining.com. And my website has a lot of information, and you can email me, and then I will send you 5 informational emails about the industry and about my program. But I would like to say what I teach. May I?
Yeah, yeah. Go for it.
Okay. Okay. So in my training, I teach, I have to put my reading glasses on. Sorry, guys.
Not a
Okay.
problem.
Defining the corporate flight attendant, defining who he or she is. And let me tell you something. If you're a guy and you want to be a corporate flight attendant, this is the truth. There are some CEOs whose wives do not want a woman in the back of the airplane with her husband, so that they want a male flight attendant, or they're going to emerging market countries and they want a male. They don't want a woman. So
Okay.
if you're a guy and you're thinking about this, don't think it's just for women. So I teach distinctions between flying contract and full time, the differences between the federal air regulations where applicable to Part 91, which is a corporation or a rich person who owns their own airplane, and then Part 135 is charter. It's charter. People
Okay.
charter for X amount an hour. How the charter operators and the charter brokers work together. There are brokers, like I might be a charter operator, and I have, it's like being a real estate agent. I will have a broker help me find the exact airplane that I need for the distance I'm going, if it's a smoking or non-smoking plane, like that. How to market yourself in the industry. A lot of marketing. Managing yourself as a business person. You are your own accountant. You're your own business person. You're working on your own.
Right.
Interviewing information and salary negotiations. I teach them how to interview and how to negotiate your salary. Resumes and cover letters. I help with that. Telephone and email etiquette for business interaction. Telephone and email etiquette. Developing a professional image and dressing for success. Corporate culture. What is the corporate culture? Food safety awareness. The language of business aviation catering. I'm telling you, it's all about catering. It's outrageous. Catering and communication skills with the caterer when you're giving them your order. Food dietary, food allergy, eating trends, religious catering observations and restrictions. Catering food presentations and packaging. That's crucial. You need to know that bacteria doubles every 20 minutes and your food is cooked in the kitchen from the caterer. You need to tell them that when they pack it in the box to ice pack everything. Take your tins, your pint container, everything, wrap it in saran wrap, and then put it in the box with ice packs to keep it cold because bacteria, they might be delivering and it's 100 degrees. You know, we've had a hot summer. If they just put it in the trunk of their car, you're going to have food that's bad.
Yeah.
And then you need to save your ice packs because you're going to be continuously using them. Trip preparation from assignment to the trip's completion. I mean, if they call me today for a trip in 5 days, I'm already starting to plan. I'm not getting paid for that time, but I'm doing everything I need to do. What are fractionals? So fractionals are FlexJet and NetJets. They're called sub K part. They're called Part 91 sub Part K, and people can buy a time. It's like a timeshare. If an airplane is $10 million or something, you know, they'll charge you. They'll do if you want a plane for half the year. So they'll take 352 days divided by 2, and then you'll pay X amount of money for that amount of days. You call them up. Hi, it's Susan Friedenberg. I need a Gulfstream 550 in Philadelphia at Atlantic Aviation at 7:00. I'm going to Paris. And they have my profile, my food profile. And I'll say, and one of my friends is allergic to peanuts. Like that. But that's fractional. Okay. And they are hiring right now. What is an FBO? We don't go into airports, terminals. We go into fixed base operators. They're buildings on an airfield. And when you come into an airport, you'll see, there'll be a sign that will say general aviation. And that's where the FBOs are for the private jets. So what is an FBO, fixed base operator? How do they accommodate an airplane arriving and departing? They do your fueling, de-icing. If it's winter and you need hangar space for your plane, they'll put your plane in the hangar. They do everything to help you. They have newspapers for you, although I teach you how to get your newspapers before a trip. You can't leave without newspapers. You can't assume that they're going to be using their laptops to get news and everything. You've got to have the right newspapers. Sequence of in-flight services, duties, and aircraft responsibilities. Remain overnight responsibilities for the airplane because you've got to clean it, group it, groom it, and restock it. Aviation department communication skills. You need to be able to communicate with the mechanics, the chief pilot, the aviation manager, the chief flight attendant. And then what is a handling company and how do they support the mission? Handling companies are companies that handle your entire itinerary for leaving the country. They tell you what are the best routes to get there, what the routes are like, if there's any been any sabotages lately, this is not a safe country, or there's an Ebola, whatever, breakout, or there's been bombings, or, they coach you and they'll have a person meet your airplane wherever you are in the world and help you get your fuel, and they will direct the pilots and they'll help you with your catering. If you need the help, they're the agent and they help for major international. That's a handling company. International remote trip planning, safe global catering procurement. I teach that. Trip prep for emerging market countries, augmented crew changes. If an airplane's going to Asia, you can't work 26 hours to get there. So you're going to have a second flight attendant and you're going to do crew changes. So you might go from Teterboro to Anchorage, and then you'll get off the plane and another crew had been airlined in and you'll do swappies. But there's a whole lot to that. And I teach that. And then international customs safety and cultural awareness. I teach a lot of that. And then crew fatigue management. You're actually only supposed to fly if it's Part 91. There are no regulations for crew duty, which has a lot of people upset, but they will try to adhere to charter operations crew times, which is 16 hours domestic, 18 hours international.
Okay.
And so, there's so much to this. You can't have an ego. You've got to be able to have confidentiality and anonymity. You'd have to kill me to know who I'm flying before I fly them. I will never say who I flew before a trip ever,
Yeah,
ever.
I would imagine that that can get a little crazy, and just being able to make sure that you are not mentioning, those things beforehand for safety reasons, right? For that person and for
Yeah,
yourself too. Going on the actual flight.
right. I mean, right now there's a few people that are very verbal about our politics right now, and if they were on an airplane, they might be using an alias name to protect themselves. And
Right.
it's just you can't talk about who you're flying and who and what they said or what you saw. Um,
Well, yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So, I know that you've flown some famous people, and so how does that differ from, is that just a whole different world in the same world? When there's someone that you recognize, either a name before you get on, or when you get on and you start providing the service on the plane, you see the person that you've seen on TV or somewhere else.
well, it's been years, and I can tell a couple very quick stories. Um, because it's way past it. But I've flown Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter, I took him from Plains, Georgia to, I don't remember exactly where we went. We picked him up. I was with Coke. We picked him up in Plains and took him to a Martin Luther King birthday celebration. Martin Luther King was passed, of course. And because of his habitat with humanity, I so honored what he was doing, building homes for homeless people. So I contacted a chocolate Swiss chef and had him build me a hammer, a screwdriver, and a wrench in really dark chocolate, nuts,
Wow.
screws, and bolts, sprinkle it with cocoa powder. I had a beautiful black leather box lined with satin and wrapped it beautifully. And I said, Mr. President, I so honor what you're doing for people, and I would like to give this to you. And he opened it, and he was so taken back. He says, I've never gotten a gift like this. And then it's on my wall. He got the Secret Service to get my name and address, and he wrote me a beautiful letter that's framed and said that the tools were the talk of the Martin Luther King dinner.
Wow.
I've,
And that's what makes you the best, right? And for
yeah,
your training and all of that. So then what happens there if so you're not paying for all of that, correct? Are you
no, no,
working
no.
with
The
the
company's paying for
company?
it.
Okay, so you're working with the company and you're telling them, hey, I would like to do this and get the permission for it.
Yeah, if your contract, all your expenses are paid for, and the catering is paid for directly from the caterer to the company, and
Okay.
then you get all your expenses. If you're full time with the company, you have a company credit card, and you're getting 401 and health benefits, and you're an employee.
Okay. Okay. Great. So, what other stories do you have for us on the famous side of things?
Oh well, this was this. Well, okay. Um, I'm not okay. I've flown Paul McCartney 13 times. That was pretty cool. And he is so sweet, unpretentious, kind, funny, and nice. And I mean, flying a Beetle, it was a while ago. And, and I've hardly ever tell people, well, I never tell anybody before a trip, but after a trip, I've told people when they say, who have you trained, just mostly amongst flight attendants, because all of us have flown some amazing people. But one of my favorite stories was Norman Schwarzkopf, the general from Desert Storm.
Okay.
He got on the airplane. This was so funny. He got on the airplane, and I said, General, I need to give you a very, and he was like 6'4" or something, and I'm 5'2", and I'm looking up at him, and I'm going, General, I need to give you a very quick briefing on this airplane. He goes, I've been on a lot of Gulfstreams. I don't need a briefing. I said, well, General, my briefings are not like airline briefings, and it's very quick. And he goes, I just said I don't want a briefing. I said, but you know what? If we have an accident or an incident, the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, is going to ask if you were briefed, and you would have to tell them the truth, and then I would lose my career. And he looked down at me. He said, okay, little lady, give me a briefing. So I gave him a very quick briefing. And he said, that was a good briefing. I said, I told you. And then after I took him, he was giving empowerment speeches. So when he came back on the plane, he said, Susan, he said, tell me about yourself. And he said, I met my wife in an army hospital in Vietnam, and she became a stewardess. He said, I love stewardesses. Tell me about yourself. I said, I would rather tell you about my father. And my dad was a major World War II hero. If you Google Bernie Friedenberg, World War II hero, you won't believe what you're going to see. And I said, I'd rather tell you about my dad. And I told him all about my father. And he was really, no pun intended, blown away. And he said, this airplane has a phone. I said, yeah. He goes, let's call Bernie. So it was 10 at night, and he called my father. He said, Bernie, this is General Schwarzkopf. I want to talk to you about your war record. You're a true hero. And they were on the phone for like a half an hour. And then they got off the phone. Mom said Daddy was doing Jack Daniels. He was so freaked out. He was like, I mean, I've flown a lot of people. Senator Dole, I flew him twice. He wrote my father a letter. This is the detail. He was in World War II and he had a damaged hand from the war. He can't cut things. And the trip sheet said he wanted filet mignon. So I cut it up, and he said, how did you know to do that? I said, because I know who you are and I know what happened to you in the war. And he said, oh my God. And he said, tell me about yourself. And that's when I said, I'd rather tell you about my dad. And he wrote me an amazing letter that's on the wall. And then he wrote Daddy an amazing letter.
Wow.
I mean, so I've flown some really cool people, and then I've flown some that are, really high end and uppity and, on not the CEOs, but, rich people that have their own airplanes. And you just have to take it. You can't have an ego. And as I tell my
Yeah.
students, you're a paid guest on the airplane. You're not there to schmooze with the people. You're hired to do a job and disappear. It's their space. The CEOs are conducting meetings at 46,000 feet, and if it's a family-owned plane, it's family time. You're a paid guest on the airplane.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's really cool to know, your experience, your background, to know a little bit more about your father and where you came from, and then also, more about your training. And so we're going to start to wrap up the episode. I know, between me and you, when we were talking before the episode, we could probably have hours long episode here, but we don't have that kind of time on our hands. So we're going to start to wrap up the episode. But one thing that I like to do for all of my guests on the podcast here is to allow them to have the floor at the very end. So whatever you would like to say to the audience about private aviation, about your program, about anything that you would like, you can do so now.
Just that I'm passionate about aviation. I'm passionate about business aviation, and I'm passionate about my training. I've worked very hard putting that intense 8-pound manual together, and I love teaching, and I teach with a lot of humor. And I tell stories. I've made some mistakes. I've been banished once or twice from an airplane for something that I did or something inadvertently that happened with catering. And I have no ego. So I tell the stories of what happened, and I take responsibility for it. I want you to learn from my mistakes. There haven't been too many mistakes, but I have no ego. I'm passionate. I want you to have this amazing career. It's the most unbelievable thing. And it's really cool when you when the passengers are disembarking and they give you a hug or they say thank you. And if you're flying a rock and roll band and then they'll say, you made the being on tour is so hard. You've made being on tour, the best part was being on this airplane. Like that. It's just so rewarding. And, sometimes you get tipped, you can take tips, and it's just great. And I encourage anybody who's interested to reach out to me. I love answering questions. And my email is scffa training, don't laugh, at AOL. I still have AOL because I started my training with AOL and everything's printed with AOL.
Yeah,
So
everything's already there. Yeah,
yeah, so
that
it's
makes sense.
SCFFA training at AOL.com.
Okay, we will also have your website that you mentioned earlier on the description of the video below. So if anyone is interested, you've gone through and you've watched this episode, and it really sparked your interest in jumping into this type of career. Susan, as she very well, explained to us throughout this episode. She is seems to me that she would be the best person to be talking about about getting into this industry and getting into this profession. So I would highly recommend after just my 40 minutes here of talking to her that she would be a really good resource for you. So you can go and click on that link below if you are interested. Um,
I really appreciate this opportunity to share with people, Dagan. Thank you so much for inviting me.
of course, and thank you very much for being on the show. Like I said, people like you is the reason why we have the show, and I really appreciate you. I know we had a little bit of technical difficulties starting out, and we were able to figure those out together and make this happen today. So I really appreciate you coming on, Susan.
Thank you.
All right, well, that'll do it for another episode of Beyond the Hangar. We will see you guys on the next one.
Every trip begins with a choice. Spend hours navigating crowded airports, security lines, and delayed flights? Or take control of your schedule. With Triton Air, your aircraft is ready when you are. Arrive, board, and be on your way in minutes, not hours. Whether you're traveling for business or escaping for the weekend, Triton Air delivers a private aviation experience built entirely around you. Personalized service, unmatched convenience, and the freedom to fly where you want, when you want. Triton Air. Private travel without compromise.